Good morning. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce David Walker, founder and CEO of the Comeback America Initiative and former Comptroller General of the United States from 1998 to 2008. He is here today to speak on the current state of the economy and the steps we need to take to rebuild it in his presentation, Fiscally Speaking, Putting Our Federal Finances in Order. As founder, president, and CEO of the Comeback America Initiative, Mr. Walker leads CAI's efforts to promote fiscal responsibility and sustainability by engaging public and assisting key policymakers on a nonpartisan basis to achieve solutions to America's federal, state, and local fiscal imbalances. Recently in July, the CAI released its report, Restoring Fiscal Sanity, which outlines two approaches with a number of key reforms for U.S. policymakers and government officials to consider in order to put the nation's finances back on track. Mr. Walker has long been an advocate on raising these issues to the forefront of public debate. Beginning in September 2005, while serving as Comptroller General, Mr. Walker, along with representatives from organizations including the Brookings Institution, Concord Coalition, and the Heritage Foundation, began participating in a series of nationwide town hall-style forums to bring attention to the mounting federal debt and the challenges posed by emerging demographic and economic trends. A critically acclaimed documentary, I.O. USA, sometimes called The Inconvenient Truth of the Debt Crisis, was based on these tours and was released in 2008. If you get a chance to see this, it will wake you up. It's a fiscal wake-up for anybody who wants more information on the debt. Mr. Walker has also served as the president and CEO of the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, an organization dedicated to raising public awareness of nature and urgency of key fiscal challenges threatening America's future. He has authored 3 books, including Comeback America, Turning the Country Around and Restoring Fiscal Responsibility, which is a national bestseller. And he has over 35 years of public and private work in companies and government organizations. He's a frequent writer in media commentary as well. Please help me welcome David Walker.
Thank you, Valerie. It's always good to be introduced by a fellow GAO professional and a new member of the Rotary. It's a pleasure to be back at Rotary, also here in Denver. Denver's one of my favorite cities, and I have occasion to come to Denver several times a year between the city of Denver, Boulder, and when I get lucky to possibly be able to ski sometimes up in the mountains during the wintertime. I had the opportunity to address this club, I think, 3 or 4 years ago, probably closer to the 4 years, and I'd like to tell you that things are a lot better since the last time I was here. Unfortunately, the numbers are much worse. The good news is the American people get it. They're ahead of their elected officials. They know we're living beyond our means, and they want something done about it. And in addition to that, Washington is starting to pay more attention, and we now have this special super committee, call it whatever you want, who is supposed to be reporting by November 23rd for an up or down vote in the Congress by December 23rd. And it's very, very clear that the 2012 election will have to address the issue of how are we going to start putting our finances in order. So what I'd like to do is to show you a few slides and save some time for Q&A to make the point. Provocative statement. Government has grown too big, promised too much, and waited too long to restructure. At most levels, but clearly at the federal level. In 1800, the federal government was 2% of the economy. This year, it's almost 24%, and based upon reasonable and sustainable assumptions, absent a change in course, it's going to be approaching 40% by 2040. And if you add state and local government on top of that, government could be half of the economy by 2040. That is not an acceptable outcome. And the composition has changed dramatically such that rather than being dominated by defense at the federal level 40 years ago, it's now dominated by social insurance programs. And in addition, unlike 40 years ago when Congress got to decide how over 60% of the budget would be spent every year, it's now less than 40, and going down to less than 20 by 2040. And what about spending? This is spending per person adjusted for inflation. So inflation has been taken out. If it's blue down below, it means the Democrats control both houses of Congress. If it's red, the Republicans. And if it's a diagonal line, it means it was split. And then at the top, you can see which party controlled the White House. Here's the bottom line. Spending has been out of control. It is a bipartisan problem. It has been particularly problematic in the last 10 years. There is not a party of fiscal responsibility. There are persons who are fiscally responsible of both parties, but not a party. And the worst year that we probably had in recent times was 2003, when three things were done in 1 year. First, second round of tax cuts. We could afford the first, but we couldn't afford the second because we had already returned to deficits. We invaded a sovereign nation without declaring war and without paying for it, known as Iraq. And Medicare prescription drugs was passed, adding $8 trillion in unfunded obligations when Medicare was already underfunded, $20 trillion. From George Washington to William Jefferson Clinton, we accumulated $5.6 trillion in debt. A little over 10 years later, we've well more than doubled it. And we could double it again in the next 10 years if we don't change course. And the problem is not the debt you see. The problem is the off-balance sheet obligations. The huge unfunded obligations associated with Medicare and Social Security that are tens of trillions of dollars. In effect, they represent the ice in the iceberg that's below the water that you can't see. And they grow faster than inflation and faster than the economy when the economy grows. So as a result, you can't grow your way out. You can't inflate your way out. You have to make tough choices. And we had to raise the debt ceiling this year. Why? Because this year, revenues are less than 15% of the economy versus the historical average of 18%. Spending is about 24% of the economy versus the historical average of about 20.5%. We are $4 billion a day short. Government is spending $4 billion a day more than it's taken in, including the weekends. And if you eliminated all discretionary spending, defense, homeland security, judicial system, Congress of the United States, Executive Office of the President, education, transportation, Interior Department, if you eliminated everything, we're still $2 billion a week short. That's how bad it is. And if you look at what's happened on revenues and spending since World War II, we are spending at 40 to 50% higher level per person, adjusted for inflation, than at the peak of World War II. And our deficits are comparable to the level of deficits we ran during World War II. Well, I would respectfully suggest we got something for World War II. We can debate what we're getting for these deficits. And debt per person, adjusted for inflation, is double what it was at the end of World War II, and it is growing at record rates. Now, what about other countries? We've seen a lot of countries in the news. If you want to compare our debt levels as a percentage of the economy, which is really the key metric, debt as a percentage of the economy, you have to add federal, state, and local because countries finance government differently. And when you do that, you'll find out that according to the International Monetary Fund, the United States was already worse than some of the European countries that are in the news, and it's 3 years away from where Greece was when Greece had its debt crises. Now, we're not Greece because we're the largest economy on earth. We're the temporary sole superpower, and we have over 60% of the world's global reserve currency. So that means that we have more rope, more time, but not unlimited time. On the other hand, don't forget history. Greece is the cradle of democracy, was the greatest civilization on earth at one time, controlled most of the known world, and now Greece is a mere shadow of itself because it's lost its way. It has strayed from the principles and values that made it great. And by the way, Greece has also got somebody to bail it out, although they may be getting tired of bailing it out. And in fact, in my view, one of the things that Europe has to consider is to differentiate between maximizing the common market and the size of the Eurozone. The Eurozone is not stable, I think, and sustainable as large as it is now. They're going to have to come to grips with that at some point in time, but it's going to be politically very difficult. And unlike the Indo